Hello, I'm Dana Sparks, broker with Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors. And today's contract tip has to deal with the 11-day unilateral extension. 11 days? Yes, potentially 11 days. If you go binding on the GAR contract, in the purchase and sale agreement, F20, there was a revision done in May of this year, 2015. And the revision allows for the parties, either one of the parties, to extend the contract unilaterally by 8 days. It used to be 7 days, but in the revision, the GAR Forms Committee changed it to 8 days. In paragraph B5A, right to extend the closing date, it states, buyer or seller may unilaterally extend the closing date for 8 days upon notice to the other party given prior to or on the date of closing. Now there are only certain conditions that the parties may extend unilaterally, and this hasn't changed. The only thing that changed was it changed from the 7 days to the 8 days. So if number one, seller cannot satisfy valid title objections, excluding title objections that can be satisfied through payment of money or by bonding off of the same, or that don't prevent the seller from conveying good and marketable title, as that term is defined herein. Or two, if the buyer's mortgage lender, if any, including in all cash transactions, or the closing attorney cannot fulfill their respective obligations by the date of closing, provided that the delay is not caused by the buyer. Or three, the buyer has not received required estimates or disclosures, and buyer is prohibited from closing under federal regulations. So again, the issue is the change was made was it is no longer a 7-day unilateral extension, but it is now an 8-day unilateral extension, providing one of those conditions applies. This is definitely going to be an issue with the new CFPB TRID changes going into effect October 3rd. There are going to be delays to closings caused by the lender not being able to perform their duties because they are going to have to redisclose. In that situation, the parties, if you're binding under a GAR contract, can delay the closing. So why do I say 11 days? First of all, make sure you realize that now it is 8 days. But why do I say 11 days? Well, I'll tell you. But before I tell you, let me first talk about the other forms that the parties would use if they are going to enact this unilateral extension. If the parties do have to unilaterally extend, then you are going to use another GAR form, which is GAR Form F133, notice to unilaterally extend the closing. The issue is the GAR Forms Committee, when they did the revision in May, they changed it in the purchase and sale agreement, but they failed to change it in the complementary documents. So this form still says, can you see it? Notice to unilaterally extend for 7 days. It states it in the title and it states it under the information. So at this point, you as the agent are going to mark out 7 days and put 8 days. If the other agent has an issue with that, you are going to professionally remind them of the document that the buyers and sellers already signed and already agreed to this 8-day unilateral extension. Hopefully GAR will make the appropriate change in the documents in the next printing of the contracts. The other place that you have to be aware of this change where they didn't make the complementary change is in GAR Form F104, Amendment to Change Closing and Possession Date. In this form too, under the extension paragraph, it still it indicates a 7-day unilateral extension. It says the right to unilaterally extend the closing date for 7 days as provided for in the date of closing and transfer of possession shall remain in full force or is hereby terminated. Again, you are going to want to mark through that and write 8 days because the parties have already agreed to that when they signed the purchase and sale. Okay, so we're clear on that. So now why am I talking about an 11-day extension? That's an awfully long time. And if you are an agent representing a seller who has a moving company lined up, ready to go, 11 days is a long time to potentially put that moving company off. If you represent a buyer who has just sold their house or has given up a lease, 11 days is potentially a long time to find somewhere to live if they don't have anywhere to live. So here is why I say 11 days. Because we go back to the purchase and sale agreement, and it states in paragraph C4I, extension of deadlines. No time deadline under this agreement shall be extended by virtue of it falling on a Saturday, Sunday, or federal holiday, except for the date of closing. So, let's say the buyer and the seller originally agreed to close on a Friday. In this example, let's just say they agreed to close on Friday, October 2nd, 2015. Then the lender had to do new disclosures, could not close, so the buyer invoked the right to unilaterally extend the contract for 8 days. So here was the original date of closing, the 2nd. Then we count 8 days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8th day would be October 10th, which is a Saturday. The paragraph I just read to you, if a closing occurs on a Saturday or Sunday or federal holiday, it can be extended. So we can't close on Saturday the 10th. We can't close on Sunday the 11th. And then here, look here, Monday, October 12th, Columbus Day, a federal holiday. So the next contractual closing date would be here, Tuesday, October 13th. So if you look at the original date of closing, the 2nd, and the parties use this unilateral extension for 8 days, here's how 8 days magically becomes 11 days. Here's the 2nd. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, Saturday, 9, Sunday, 10, federal holiday, closing on the 13th, which is an 11-day extension. Now the parties can close sooner than that if the lender can get the disclosures done and the closing attorney has the time in their schedule. But I just want for you to be aware as an agent when interacting with buyers and sellers that this 8-day unilateral extension can potentially extend the closing for 11 days. Just a note regarding extension of closings. If the parties are binding under the RE forms contract, not the GAR forms, but under the RE forms, there is no unilateral extension afforded in that purchase and sale agreement. So with the CFPB TRID changes coming up, if a lender has to redisclose and the closing has to be delayed and it's going to go after the last agreed upon closing date, then the buyer and the seller are going to be required to sign an amendment, a bilateral amendment to extend the closing date. Remember, if there's no unilateral right to extend in the RE forms. So if the seller does not agree to extend, then the transaction will terminate and the buyer will potentially default on the contract. Not because they are at fault, but they will default if they are not ready, willing, and able to come to closing at the last agreed upon closing date. Just something to keep in mind. Pay attention to the forms under which the parties are binding and your closing dates. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I'm Dana Sparks, broker with Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.